Welcome to the Business Grind, where we give you an inside perspective on what it takes to start, build, and run a successful business. Here are your hosts, Danny Shaw and Sean Michael Wellington.
All right. Hello to everyone in podcast land today. Thanks for joining us. Sean, how you feeling?
Feeling good and ready to start a new topic. It's been a while since we've done a topic like this.
Yeah, I think it's timely as well that we are doing this topic. So, yeah. So, on today's episode, we're going to discuss essentially, starting a business during a recession, where is business and, kind of running through that and seeing, discussing should you not, should you wait, and just kind of understanding the lay of the land and ramifications during the time of a recession and trying to start a business, all right?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of times, and I'm guilty of it myself. Sometimes we'll use the economy or things that are outside of our control as reasons not to do something. So I think having this conversation puts that in perspective. So.
Okay, cool. So maybe we'll start off first with just talking about what a recession is. And I as we do usually when we give the explanations, we have to give a disclaimer. This isn't the most, all the nuances of the definition, but just a top level understanding so that we have a baseline to move forward with, right? Right. So I get in basic terms, a recession is usually defined when the economy of a country is decreased for an extended period of time. I believe usually it's considered like two financial quarters, and it's marked by GDP contraction, like it gets lower, higher unemployment rates, and lower consumer spending. Is that your understanding from a baseline perspective, Sean?
Yes. I would say, for examples, right, the most recent example was, there was a COVID recession, but before that, the 2009 economic downturn, right? Those are the most recent examples, I would say.
Depending on who you ask, right, and depending if how detailed you get into the definition of what a recession is, you still, even now, you may have people who say we're not in a recession, we're not really there, we're feeling symptoms of it, but for all intents and purposes, this is what it's usually defined as, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Would you say at this point, are we in a recession, Sean?
In my personal opinion, again, I'm not an economist, so Feel free to dispute my opinion. But I would say no, just based off of the way the economy is running right now, right? There isn't the unemployment numbers are going down, not going up. The joblessness claims and stuff like that. So we're seeing the particular stock markets there. We know crypto is kind of taking a hit currently at this date and time, right? But the overall stock market is not, what was it, 2 cycles? Right, yeah, it hasn't hit that threshold, I don't think.
Okay, fair enough. I'm actually surprised you said no. It's not because I feel like I think we are. To be quite honest, I don't know. We're feeling, I think from our perspective, it's like, well, we're definitely feeling symptoms of something. Something is going on economy-wise, right? With inflation and cost and things like that. But if we're looking at it from a textbook definition of what a recession is, I don't think so, but that doesn't dismiss the fact that we are feeling some sort of economic stress right about now. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And I think we're definitely there's been definitely warning signs and people warning for impending recession, right? So
right.
So yeah, that's why I say take my definition with a grain of salt, because all the economic factors may be pointing at a recession. We just haven't stepped onto it yet. So.
Right. We're recession-ish, like not fully in, but we might be. But I will say for people that want to get a little bit more in-depth on, all the nuances that go into defining what a recession is after this episode, the Wall Street Journal, their podcast, they actually did a great episode kind of explaining what a recession is and why there's a lot of back and forth on if we are in one or not. So I would highly recommend that episode. I think we set the baseline on what it is. We still don't necessarily know if we're in one, but considering all the talk around economics and finance and businesses, I think right now just on a lot of people's minds might be the question of, should they start one now?
Yeah. So I'll kick it back to you. What is your opinion? Should you or shouldn't you?
Well, I mean, I think this, right? I don't think you should ever wait to start a business if you want to start a business. All right. So I don't think, for all intents and purposes, to say, hey, well, I have this business idea, but I keep hearing that we're in a recession and I might not get business and it might go under, so I'm gonna just wait until the economy gets better. That's not a perspective that I would support or recommend someone takes, regardless of the economic situation in the world right about now.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think when you use it in that specific way you described, like, I don't want to do this because of the economy, and it's that blanket, right? It's not, say you had a real estate business and the market's crazy, all the prices are high and the interest rates are crazy. Well, then you're kind of making sense, right? That's why you don't want to do this real estate venture. But your food truck business isn't necessarily directly related to overall economy. There's not a necessary reason to stop you. You just may have to play with your margins differently, or whatever the case may be. So
Right.
yeah, I agree with you in that when you make the statement exactly how you said it, I don't want to do business A or do idea B because the economy, it's usually like either it's like a manifestation of your fears of failure, or it's something else holding you back. That's not the economy usually.
Right. And I also think that, there are plenty of benefits that come with starting a business during a recession, that I think a lot of people may not consider or think about. I think what usually happens is this. They say, oh, nah, we in a recession, I'm going to chill because, like we just mentioned, costs, there's no business. I think a lot of times you might think that, hey, because there's a recession, there won't be any business opportunities for me anyway, right? So I'm going to wait till everything is right and everything gets better. But by the time that happens, usually everybody is in on the market or in the game because the economy is getting better. So you might have missed an opportunity to take advantage of a few things during that time, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Like I will say, for instance, like low interest rates. Like I don't know how you may plan to fund your business or things like that, but usually during those lean economic times are usually when you can get a lot of good deals on loans, and things like that, and you can negotiate rates and salary wages with people, because the economy is cooling off a bit and might not hit the pockets as hard as it would have been if it was going and roaring as much as we are used to it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, kind of the same idea. If you're doing something where there's a lot of people in that space, right? A recession may decrease the competition you have in that space. So now you kind of can get your footing and start your business with less competitors in the beginning, right? Until the economy turns around. So that's another advantage.
Right. And I just think it leads to more opportunities. I just feel like there's always going to be opportunities. That's just my outlook on things. There will always be opportunities. So it's not even to say, oh, well, there's more opportunities during a recession, but there are more opportunities to possibly get certain talent recruited for your team and for your business that you might not have been able to do because of the demand at the time, right? So, people are a little bit more flexible to even lend their talents and not necessarily just want money, right? Like maybe you find a partner or a co-founder or anything of that sort during those times where you can trade off a bit of equity because economic circumstances have changed for a lot of people during that time.
Yeah, so I guess it forces you to be flexible. Yeah.
We can go on. Assets, things become cheaper, obviously, because even vendors and suppliers, because everything is contracting right about at that moment, right? So you even have vendors and suppliers, property, a lot of things take a hit during a recession, which again leads to more opportunities to cop things on the low, right? Supplies, property, just everything can kind of work in your favor because you're getting in a little bit cheaper,
Yeah.
And and the thing with a recession as well is that unfortunately, some businesses do get hit hard. I mean, that's the nature of business, right? And it's the not the glamorous and pretty side of businesses, but some businesses do get hit hard, excuse me, and are forced to close or sell and or just give away things, and for business that might be starting up during that same time, it's like grand opening, grand closing. While one is closing and getting rid of things, you have an opportunity for your business venture or something to be the opening and start and, benefit from those opportunities there. Right.
Yeah. You never know where your opportunity is coming from. Exactly. Yep.
Right. With that being said, now, Sean, we know you have a business, you have a few businesses, right? During this time. Now, I know we have this show and, we talk about stuff all the time. But with that being said, if you didn't have a business at this moment, how would you even, would you be open to starting one now? And what areas would you consider?
So and this may be a little specific to, kind of my industry, but I would say yes, to answer your question, I would consider starting a business now, simply because back to what we were talking about earlier is the flexibility, right? So now there's a lot of hybrid work, there's a lot of remote work. So it gives you some of the roles and tasks have evolved and changed. And for a lot of businesses, you can outsource to people that you trust or people that do good work but aren't necessarily in your direct market. So I think now is the most interesting time, like in a long time, to start a business, because you can do business in a lot of different ways now.
No, okay, but would you have a specific industry you would try to dip your toe in, or not really?
No, I really can't think of a specific, but I will say that, just going back to real estate earlier, right? It's, certain markets, yes, there's a buying boom. People are buying again, right? So maybe you don't want to jump into that race, right?
Right.
But maybe there's another real estate play, whether it's a rental property or whatever it is. But just the fact that where are those people buying, they're moving away from somewhere, right? So there's your opportunity, maybe. I think real estate, there's some plays just because of what's going on right now, personally.
Right. Okay, fair enough. I will say there was a book I read a long time ago. It's gotta find it somewhere. It's called Naked Economics, like naked. And it was a thing. It was one passage that I had took away from it that always stuck with me, and it was like, well, money doesn't disappear. Now, I know some people probably looking at their portfolio over the last few months and like, you a damn liar. But in general, money doesn't necessarily, the concept is like, well, money doesn't disappear. It just moves into other markets and other arenas, right?
Exactly.
So, so yes, even if your money has disappeared from your portfolio investments because of the value, it did move somewhere else, right? So with that being said, while there might be a recession, it doesn't mean that the opportunities have necessarily disappeared. It means that it has moved somewhere else, but we may not necessarily know where it has moved to just yet at the moment, right? So with that being said, I mean, it's kind of chiming on what you were saying about the real estate. I don't know if I would recommend, real estate or dip my toe into that arena during a recession. I think for me, I would probably just try to do something service based. That would be my lane, right?
Now let me ask you why. Just curious. You're probably about to get into it.
Well, you know me. I'm big on I don't like to incur a lot of costs, right? I'm not necessarily cheap. I'm not cheap, but I don't want to be wasteful in any business endeavor, right? So I think if we are in a recession, if cash flow is kind of limited and things like that, I would probably advise, to do something that's a little bit more service based, just to kind of minimize that overhead that might be needed if you were producing a product or needed a lot of overhead and inventory and products to launch with. And I feel like with a service base, you're trading a bit more time over the product, right? Because you're not necessarily, your service is your product, but it's not like you're out here sourcing raw materials and goods to create a product and hope that people will buy it during these times.
Okay, yeah, I can get behind that. I guess my initial reaction to you saying service was me just kind of looking at the state of the world right now and what's the living wage, right? What people consider living wage, and a lot of the service industry wages are, those are wages they're fighting to increase.
Right.
So you're jumping right into but you didn't mean necessarily on that scale where you're hiring service workers per se.
No. Yeah. I didn't
gotcha.
mean. Yeah, I don't mean service workers. I mean any type of service, whether it's
Right.
designing stuff for folks, or tax services, anything that requires a little bit more of a, hey, I need you to do this for me for this amount of price, and I've delivered a service and compensate me for that. As opposed to, I'm tinkering away. And I know it sounds contradictory because we just talked about how cheap materials and goods and things might be right now. Because so it's not to say don't do it. I'm just saying my path based on how I'm wired, right, would probably start off with a service based business. But now that we're talking about it, it's funny because I think what was it? Boy, when was did we count 2008, 2007? That was like the last major recession we were in, right?
08, 09, yeah,
08,
yeah.
excuse me. So actually around that time, I had a business venture at that time during a recession that I did invest heavily in inventory and products, and it's all sitting in my house right now.
I mean,
I
that's
still
probably how
have
you
it.
learned that lesson,
That's
I
probably
guess.
why I learned that lesson. I got a whole bunch of product, and I'm not getting rid of it. I'll figure it out one day. But I got like two big Rubbermaid bins of product sitting there that never moved for a variety of reasons. Now obviously that could have just been because it was a bad business idea, right, and had nothing to do with the recession. So, but all that to say, yes, I would lean more towards some sort of service-based type idea, type of work.
Okay,
Yeah,
gotcha.
yeah,
So my answer was real estate. Your answer was service. Gotcha.
yeah. Some service. Now, obviously, I don't have a specific industry, but I would say whatever obviously whatever your talents lends itself to, or wherever you might see that there's a need for, right? And I think I also will say I don't even think you have to reinvent the wheel. I would say it probably is more around being just observing what's around you and seeing what there might be a need for right about now in the world around you.
Yeah. So that's a perfect kind of segue into the question I was going to ask you. So we've established that you can start a business during a recession, right? It shouldn't dissuade you.
Right.
So what are some of the economic factors that you should watch for, or be cognizant of when you are starting your business in a recession? What are the things? Is it the interest rate, right? What the Fed's doing? Is it housing market? Is it, I don't know. What do you think are the things that you should be aware of when starting a business?
I just think cost in general, right? I'm not really, I'm not really big on watching and making moves based off what the feds and the interest rates and things like that, even though we talked about it just now. But mainly because it's not relevant to me. Like, I don't really go out here seeking loans and things like that for business ventures. I'll fund my own ventures type of person. But for a person who may need funding and things like that, that is something that they should be mindful of, right? Like, what are the feds doing? What the rates are looking like, and so forth. For me, I would approach it how I would approach any venture. Really, I'm real big on just crunching the numbers beforehand. Like, how much is it going to cost? How much cash flow is available, and X, Y, and Z, and not be wasteful with the spending, right? And I think a lot of times when you do start the business, we might overestimate how much things cost, or even overestimate how much we need to start the business in the first place, because we feel like this has to be this has to be set up, and it kind of becomes, well, does it really need to, or is that something that we are demanding based off our own thoughts on what we need when we start out, right?
Right. Yeah. So your old thoughts will evolve based on what you've learned during the process, like as you're
Yeah.
starting your business.
Yeah, I just think it's really, listen, if you want to just have conversation and be like, well, the Fed is doing this. That's, I guess, but that really doesn't resonate with me, right? Like, for instance, I know you were talking about real estate. Right? Was it last year, or I don't know if it was at the beginning of the pandemic and the lockdown, or last year? If you remember, everyone was talking about refinance. I don't know if that was on your radar, but for a while,
I wouldn't have thought of it till you reminded, till you just said it. But yes,
right? Remember
there was
that?
a lot of that.
Remember
Yeah.
that? Oh, you're gonna refinance? You're gonna refinance? And I was like, I'm fine. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm okay. We don't need. You don't gotta do busy work just because it's being talked about, right?
But that's what it is, right? It's busy work just to keep you, it's busy work, literally.
It's busy.
Yeah.
It's literally busy work. So I think you have to kind of be in your own little self-assured mindset to be like, all right. So if you think about the Fed raise, I wouldn't really go or base it off that, maybe unless you needed a loan or something of that sort. But even if you did need a loan of that sort, I still wouldn't hold too much weight, because what I've seen people do is they get paralysis analysis. It's just like, well, the rates went up 1%. Like, to me, that is not enough for you to change your whole direction. Right? Like, if your business is really dependent on a loan rate change of 1%, that speaks more about the fragility of your business than anything else, than whether we're in a recession or not, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think for me, it's more like, okay, well, what signs am I looking for? I'm just looking at deals. I'm looking at cost of things. I usually keep track and have a good idea of how much things may cost, how much services may cost, how much I'm paying for services that I use to run my business and my operations and stuff like that. So just seeing that, keeping an eye out on that. I usually set a little alerts, price alerts for things that I may need or considering purchasing. Those are the type of things that I usually do. Like, oh, I just got an alert that this is down, 20%, or there's a sale at this store that I usually buy from, or something like that. I will say also is that I think you should, you never know what's gonna happen, right? You just never know what's gonna happen in the future. I don't think no one knew, pandemic or COVID or anything like that. But I do think it's important to be prepared for times like this. And for me, my best strategy for being prepared during times like this is to have cash on hand.
That's usually, I feel like that's your advice for a lot of things. Like,
that is my advice for a lot
having cash on hand.
You gotta have cash on hand. Yeah, I just think that is so imperative to a lot of, the hard times. And somebody maybe think, well, how the hell I'm gonna have cash? I'm trying to start a business now, right? But I think with all of these elements, all these variables that's going on, I don't usually advise, you go in and take on a whole bunch of debt, and especially if you haven't even proven that you are successful and profitable. So once you do get to a point of success and profitability, when there are times like this, or times get lean and you are in a recession, there's enough cash on hand to take advantage of these scenarios and say, okay, well, now let me start buying up some of these things and so forth, or making a move in this area, or offering this new service that we didn't offer before, because we see that there's a need, and that I can bring on more help to hire more help to help me execute as well. When I say have cash on hand a lot, but Sean, as you know, a lot of people who don't know the behind the scenes stuff of how these bills get paid and invoices and how you pay people. It's not like when you have a job, and your job, you expect to get paid every 2 weeks or every week, or however the cadence of your job is. And when you run a business, a lot of times the business, depending on who you're dealing with, they have these net 30 payment terms, or net 30. Very rarely are you getting paid right away for your service. So that's why in advance. So that's why I'm so big on just having cash, because there's so many stories. I mean, even now we're seeing it on the news, and the business news, of these companies, they ran out of cash. But when you get into the details of how they ran out of cash and it was just bloated spending, unnecessary spending on these things, all in the spirit of growth. Are you anti-cash, Sean? Can you say
No, I'm not anti-cash, but I noticed that's a common theme with you. Is like it's definite. That's a definite plus. So if you're repeating it a couple times, it must mean something. So.
Like, yeah, Danny definitely is about the maintaining that cash, right?
You teased earlier some of the businesses that have started in the recession. So that's all I was gonna say. I was just gonna circle back to that because I'm curious what was on your list. That's all.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, they always say, well, some of the best. I feel here's before we get into that, right? You can, no matter what your point is or the argument that you're trying to position for anything, there's always, I could take one position like, oh, these are companies, successful companies that started during recessions. And then, Sean, you could turn right back around and be like, and yeah, and these are all the companies that failed during this recession. Right?
Right. Yeah.
So you could take it, all that to say, you could take it with a grain of salt, right? I could be like, well, did you know this company started and that company started? And you could be like, whatever, though. That ain't my circumstances, right? And also, if you think about the timing, right? So, there's a few on my list that I had looked up and researched, but at the same time, it's possible that these businesses are not, the same or relevant to what you may be trying to do, right? So, we got, but first start off with Burger King, right? Like Burger King was started in the 50s during the recession, right? Now that was over at this point, and that was the 1950s. So that was over 50 years ago, right? Maybe 70 years ago.
That's the Great Depression, right?
Right. Yeah.
Recession?
Oh, so
Yeah.
not even a recession, the Great Depression, right? So, I mean, take it forward. Does that mean open up a burger joint now during this recession? I don't know. I probably wouldn't, but
But I mean, maybe if you live in gentrified Brooklyn, that might make sense.
It might make sense. It might make sense. Oh man, you done triggered something in me. This might, I've been talking about. We've talked behind the scenes about a Golden Crust franchise for a while now. I should look to see what they're looking like now, if the terms and circumstances have changed considering the economic climate that we're in. Actually,
yeah.
that might be interesting. But yeah, Burger King, started and in the 1950s, that was one business. Then you have Microsoft. Microsoft is more or less a household name at this point, so they started during the recession. And I know, it's tech, and there was a lot of tech companies that was founded, in the 70s, 80s as well, and that are not here with us now. But Microsoft, who is still here with us, started around 1975 during recession. So I think there was also Uber and Airbnb around 2009 started more recently during the recession as well. Now I will say, I'm sorry, I'm dominating. Sean, did you have something on your list?
Nah, not really.
Oh.
But I didn't even have a list. Why I was wanting to know what you had.
Okay. Well,
I have one company, but they don't really count because they were like, it was like 2019, right before the recession.
What company?
I'm thinking about the wrestling company, All Elite Wrestling, AEW. They're basically funded by the owner of the Jacksonville Jaguars and then some European soccer team. I'm not familiar with the Premier League like that, but. They launched the company 2019. I think it was like November. Mm-hmm. And then obviously the pandemic happened a couple months later. So, but they're still in operation and they still made it through. So that's all. So.
You know what? That's a good point actually, because it's funny. I know your background and your history with wrestling. And I have seen clips of All Elite Wrestling lately, and I was gonna hit you up about that. Like, hey, what's going on with these folks over here? They've come across my radar a few times, but I didn't know that they started during the recession.
Yeah, I mean, it was like right before, but yeah, essentially they had to build during the recession.
Okay.
Or during COVID, I should call it the pandemic. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Got it. Oh, interesting. So yeah, that's another example. So here's one thing I do want to make a point of just saying, right? I know, we're talking about these big companies and, and I'm going to circle back to Airbnb and Uber in a second. Now, obviously, we are kind of leaning a little bit more tech heavy with these companies that have started during a recession. And there are big names. I just think for me and for a lot of people who may be listening, with these big companies, especially like a Uber or Airbnb, there is a considerable amount of funding that needs to happen prior, right? And uh, that may not be easily available to a lot of people who are starting businesses during these times and considering their circumstances. So that's why I'm usually I lean on the more side of being a little bit more cautious or assessing the risk before you dive head in, right? Because if we look at a company like a Uber, obviously everyone knows what Uber is and what they're doing nowadays. But I mean, do we know behind the scenes how much money has been spent and will probably never be recouped? You know what I'm saying? For the sake of all of us having being able to order cars at the tip of our fingers. Airbnb obviously is a little bit more profitable and doing well overall financially, but even then, with them, they stumbled a lot. It wasn't like they came out the gate and was successful or not overnight. There's still a lot of stumbling going on before they've gotten into a groove, and it's still not out the clear just yet.
So I don't know. I think going back to what you were talking about in terms of like, all right, well, how does a recession affect your business, right? All the numbers may make sense, right? But it may be whatever you're starting optically doesn't make sense during a recession, right? So it's like, all right, I'm starting a selfie service for people with Mercedes Benzes, right? Like you may not find your customer in a recession versus in an economic boom. So what you said just made me think of how a current business can also be affected and may have to pivot. So
right. Do you have any examples?
Not specifically. I just think about all the companies who had like their DEI commercials throughout the pandemic and the we care about society commercials and stuff. So like somebody produced those. They paid money for those, a lot of money in some cases, I'm sure.
Right.
So yeah.
I love how you said the "We Care About People" commercials.
Because you know what I'm talking about.
We care about black folks commercials.
All of those.
I feel like that's definitely a topic for another episode because definitely got a lot to say about that, especially with a lot of the and cutbacks that's happening with a lot of companies in those departments specifically. But yes, a lot of times you will have to pivot to be profitable or to just for survival, right? And not necessarily in a recession, just any business. Sometimes you just got to be like, all right, what we thought our business idea was is not it. But you know what? We can pivot a little and take it from there. I believe we kind of covered a little bit of that in the lean startup, where I think there were a few companies. I think like Flickr. I'm pretty sure. I think Flickr.
The photo. Yes.
Yeah, I think they started out as one type of company and realized like it was a feature that was part of their company that was really the main driver and attention getter than what they were initially trying to do. So yes, pivoting. There's nothing wrong with pivoting, especially in recession. Like I think for me, at any point in the business, whether recession or the economy is booming, I just think you need to be mindful of where there's opportunities and maybe you need to change the direction of what you're trying to do, right? And you should be open to that regardless of the state of the economy as a whole.
Yeah, for sure.
Exactly. So, all right, someone comes to you, Sean. They want to start a business right now in this economic times. Are you going to tell them no? You're going to tell them yes? Or you going to see if they have a few checklist items before you give them the advice? What are you checking for?
Yeah, let's get the checklist off just to make sure he or she has thought about this thoroughly. But ultimately, I'm open to any opportunity. I feel like if it makes sense, so I'll be with it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, for the most part, I don't think I would ever tell anyone who has an idea or want to come and create, a business of sorts not to, under any circumstance, under any economic circumstances going on in the world. But I would talk more about what their vision is and what they have now. I'm very big on making sure your foundation is right? And doesn't necessarily mean like it's right, like you have to do this, you have to do that, and you have to be set up here and stuff like that. But I do think a lot of times, regardless of the economic state, People will have ideas and want to start it, but then don't get into the nitty gritty or the details of how it's going to happen, right? And Sean, you may seen it. I don't know how. I don't have we talked about our social media consumption habits or things like that.
No, nah, I don't think we ever have.
Okay, so right about now, I have noticed a tremendous, not just now, it was probably at the start of the lockdown and the pandemic when we first got into this, the increase, we talked about this before. Remember, there was like an increase of everybody needs to be your own boss. And if you ain't your own boss, you're a loser and you ain't nothing in life and you should kill yourself and all of this other stuff that used to go on, right? And then, and I mean, did you see that, or am I just making it?
Yes,
Yeah.
100%.
Okay.
That was
Okay.
everywhere.
All right.
Yep.
Cool. So then, once we started having, some economic challenges and downturns, they've gotten very quiet, right? They've gotten very quiet. I don't see it as much, but then what I do see now is a whole bunch of these TikTok and short reel videos and things where everyone's telling each other how to be a business person and start a business, and now is the best time to start a business in a recession, and they're telling them little quick tips that really I think does a disservice to the people that's watching this, right? Because it's very glossy, like just do 1, 2, and 3 and you'll be successful in a recession, and not really asking those questions, because a lot of people, not everyone is built the same, not everyone has the same foundation, and there's probably a considerable amount of due diligence and work that need to be done on the individual's part instead of just being told to go do it, right? So for me, it's like, well, if you recession or non-recession, you want to start a business, I believe anybody could do what they want, right? So I'm like, yes, please go start it. But then I would also be like, well, how are we going about doing it, and what is the goal, and what's your plan, and all of those, as they say, the devil is in the details, or something like that. I think that's what they say. I don't know, but know what I mean?
They say that.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm bugging. It's been a long day. Excuse me. So, So for me, it's yes. Don't hesitate. I would not tell anyone to hesitate or to wait until things get better. I would just say go about it, but just make sure you're doing some, smart and calculated moves, and not just being all willy-nilly and risky during these times.
So don't get your businesses from TikTok, basically.
Oh yeah. Yes. Don't get your business. What did you just say? Don't get your business from TikTok.
Well, that's what I said, but I meant to say, I guess, business advice. But I mean, I shouldn't blanket that.
Yeah, because then somebody gonna be like, don't be taking business advice from two dudes with a podcast, right?
Fair.
I just think even if someone's listening to us, as I would say, do due diligence. If Sean or Danny says something, it's like, well, Danny and Sean said something, but you know what? Let me do a little bit more due diligence. Like I always give these little fake disclaimers to cover ourselves and stuff like, but I'm just really big on doing due diligence and not just hearing somebody say something and move forward, especially during this time, because of the economic downturn that we're in, there's so many vulnerable people right now. Right, there's a lot of vulnerability out here, and which means there is opportunities for people who may not have your best interest to scam you on these classes and all of this stuff. Be like, yeah, you start a business during a recession. Let me help you, and and so there's a lot of that going on too. So, yeah. I've seen it a lot. So, on that note. Alrighty, so I think we're both on the same page here. There's not really much to debate on if you should start one, right?
No, I think we kind of align here. It's like make sense for you and due diligence.
Right, for sure. All right, Sean. Well, it seems like we're pretty much on the same page around this topic. Not much areas of disagreement or debates, So I think for us, we are very pro start a business during a recession. Start a business whenever you want to start a business. Actually, just make sure the circumstances are right, and do your due diligence along the way. But I think Sean, as we were saying, there's never a wrong time to start a business. I would say there's just probably the circumstances may not be as favorable for you during the scenario, right?
Yeah, you might have to make sure the circumstances and the situation works for you, but don't let the recession scare you away from something.
Indeed, I totally agree with you on that. All right, Sean, giving the bars of motivation tonight for our folks out there. All right, so that's a wrap for this week's episode. We hope you enjoyed our discussion and thoughts around this topic. Hopefully provided you with some insight and helped you as you navigate your way through your business journey. As always, if you have a question you would like us to answer on the show, shoot us a message on any of our social media channels or shoot us an email at questions@businessgrindshow.com. Also, don't forget to subscribe and share on Spotify and iTunes. See you again soon. In the meantime, keep grinding.
The Business Grind is for entertainment purposes. Opinions expressed are those solely of the host and guests. Please consult with a professional and exercise discretion before engaging in any business endeavors.
I'm out here on the grind. I'm out here on the grind.